Becky.
This question is, there's a two-part question. It's for Warren and Ajit on the first part and for Greg on the second. It comes from Roger Cleffman. He says, several years ago, Mr. Buffett was quoted that a nuclear attack is the greatest risk to Berkshire Hathaway Insurance. Given the present circumstances, what would the fallout be on Berkshire Hathaway Insurance if a nuclear event occurred in the populated world? And then secondly, for Greg, has Berkshire Hathaway Energy suffered any physical or cyber attacks? And irrespective of that, has any special hardening of security been put into place?
Yeah. Well, the first half, every day since August of 1945, every day, and accelerating dramatically when a second large country had the ability to kill millions of people, which has been magnified by the incredible factor. The truth is that there is a risk every day. It's a very, very tiny risk, but as Ajit, anybody at this table could tell you, if you roll, well, they had a pair of dice out of the Desert Inn in Las Vegas for a while under a glass thing, and some guy throwing 32 passes in a row, and I don't know what, maybe the odds are 8 million to 1 against that, or 4 million to 1 against, 4 billion to 1 against it. But if you just keep rolling the dice, everything will happen. I mean, if it get 330 million Americans out tomorrow, every American says heads or tails, and they do it every day. After 10 days, you've got 330,000 of them that have called the flip 10 times in a row, and if you do it 10 more days, you've still got a bunch of people who've done it 20 times in a row, and they really think they have learned how to control the flip. Well, the answer is the world is flipping a coin every day as to whether people who can literally destroy the planet as we know it, will do it. And unfortunately, the major problem is with people that have large stocks of nuclear weapons and ICBMs. When they talk about using tactile nuclear weapons because somebody will be upset because they're losing a war, I mean, does anybody think that somebody's willing to kill, hundreds of thousands of people with tactile weapons? I mean, why do they stop? But if they're, it is a very, 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 very dangerous world,
but we don't have any way of protecting
There's no way
against a big nuclear attack. No. I know a man who said, I know what I'm going to do if there's a nuclear war. I'm going to crawl under the table and kiss my ass goodbye.
Well, yeah, and Charlie is in charge of loss control at Berkshire. We have no solution for it.
No, we don't.
And there isn't any solution for it. And it's extraordinary when you think about it. In August of 1939, September 1st, as you all know, Hitler moved into Poland, but nobody really knew that much about it here. I mean, the news you got from the newsreel you went to because the theater was air conditioned, or something. So if I went to the movies, which you wanted to do in the summer because it was air conditioned in August of there was a few people on the screen and some guy with an authoritative voice telling you the German forces are just moved into Poland, and picture of a few tanks maybe, and it was over in a minute. Now, of course, all day, every day. You see people dying who you very much empathize with, and it could be you instead of them, and it's just so different. But in August of 1939, there was a letter sent to President Roosevelt about a month ahead of time. And why did he get that letter? He got the letter because Hitler was so anti-Semitic, basically. He drove all the Jews that could see it coming out of Germany, and among them were some great scientists. And Leo Szilard, who was, I think, obviously from Hungary originally, but somehow he got driven out. Einstein got driven out. And Leo Szilard lands eventually in the United States. And he writes a letter to tell the President of the United States, Franklin D. Roosevelt, that there's a bunch of uranium moving different ways or whatever it may be. I don't know anything about physics, zero. I don't know what the off and on sign is. But in any event, I know what the letter did, because he writes a letter and says, something big may happen in physics, and America better get to it first. But then he has the problem of, how do I get it to Roosevelt? Leo Szilard, who's he, the President of the United States? So he figures if he gets Einstein to co-sign it, that the President will pay attention, and he's right. So he goes and gets Einstein, and the two of them send the letter, and they send it to Roosevelt, and they wouldn't necessarily have been in the United States if it, Hitler had a different, hadn't had the crazy views about Jews, basically. And so anyway, that letter went, and we developed the atom bomb before anybody else did. It was a very, very fortunate development that Leo Szilard and Einstein happened to end up in the United States rather than perhaps be someplace else. Who knows? But the accidents of history, and there's going to be more accidents in connection with atomic weapons. We've come close. Somewhere up north, and NORAD gets a crazy signal, and we've had wrong training tapes placed. One time, we're in the Soviet Union or some, it looks like things are going on, and we can't do anything about it. And that is one risk that Berkshire absolutely has no interest in, even though you can say everybody in the world should have an interest, but it doesn't do us any good. The feeling doesn't do us any good to think about it. But that doesn't stop the fact that there are two powers in the world that, through miscalculation of the other's intentions, through all kinds of things, have come close in the past. And Charlie and I lived through the Cuban Missile Crisis, and we knew there was some chance that weapons of mass destruction would be used. And believe me, there's a lot more bad that can happen. And humanity has not really come up with a counterforce to technology. I mean, if you live back in the caveman ages, if you were a sociopath or something, you threw a rock at the guy in the next cave, or something. I mean, it was sort of proportional to, and we kept developing, and then there was this breakthrough where technology has totally outrun humanity, and we'll see what happens, but so far so good. And Berkshire does not have an answer, though. There's certain things we don't write policies on because we wouldn't be able to make good on them anyway, for that. And everybody would know we wouldn't be able to make good on them. So we're not you have that risk, and there's nothing Berkshire can protect you against. And we've been very lucky so far. Ajit, did you ever get any questions in terms of?
In addition to all what Warren has said in terms of the chance of something like this happening, the additional thing that concerns me about a nuclear situation is my lack of ability to really estimate what our real exposure is in the event of a nuclear event. When you're talking about other big exposures we have, earthquake and hurricane and cyber, I can, with some reasonable degree of accuracy, have a point of view in terms of how large our exposures can be and how big our loss can be. When it comes to a nuclear thing, I sort of surrender. It's very difficult for us to estimate how bad can be. Very many different lines of exposures will be affected by it. And even though in almost all our contracts we try and exclude nuclear as a covered peril, nevertheless, if something like that were to happen, I'm fairly positive that the regulators and the courts will hold it against the insurers, and they'll rewrite the contract and we'll be required to pay. For example, one thing which is already being talked about, we issue what are called fire policies. And these fire policies try and exclude nuclear as a covered peril. But there are several regulators who feel that, gee, if it's a fire policy and if the nuclear attack causes a fire, then how can you exclude fire? And you better include fire. So, debates like that we will have to live with, and it'll be very difficult for the insurance industry to fight back both the regulators and the court systems in terms of what is covered and what is not covered.
And there won't be any regulators or anybody else. So we'll leave it to a million years of reconstruction. Einstein said that, he said, I know not what the weapons will be for World War III, but I know the weapons for World War IV will be sticks and stones. There's a lot of things. I mean, it just, if you're worried about the effect of nuclear attacks, you got other things to worry about than the value of your Berkshire. I'll put it that way. and what other cheerful things? Station.
Warren, do you want me to touch on the cyber?
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah, I'll just touch on the cyber because it was raised, and when you do think of Berkshire and they use Berkshire Hathaway Energy as a reference, but cyber risk and managing that risk, both at Berkshire, really falls across all of our subsidiaries, and it's a constant risk that's there. It's one of our greatest risks we're always evaluating and trying to literally defend against. And if we use Berkshire Hathaway Energy as an example, we would receive billions of attacks every day against our various operating systems. So that's basically what our team is in place for. Both they harden the assets to deflect it, and then evaluating the underlying attacks we have, every second of the day. And by the way, that would we'd have a number of operating subsidiaries that experience that, but obviously it's the rail and the energy and a few others that we spend a lot of time on, a lot of effort, a lot of resources. And the good news is that through to today, our teams have done an exceptional job. We really haven't had a significant event. We've had some minor events at small businesses, but across our major businesses, across our major operating systems, we've had the proper security protocol in place to avoid events, but it never stops. Our team would tell you that every day that's a risk they recognize and a risk they're addressing within within the businesses. So a significant risk, but a significant priority for all of our operating teams.
Yeah, and I would add one thing. I think Greg knows way more about this than I do, but my impression from everything I've seen is that you always have, historically the private industry has always said the government can't do anything right, and government always says that private industry is just thinking about itself, all these things. The truth is, from everything I've seen, is that the cooperation between government and business in terms of trying to minimize the threat of cyber problems, I think has been magnificent, basically.
Yeah, excellent point. When it comes to cyber, the collaboration between a variety of U.S. agencies and our individual businesses, it's incredibly strong, including down to the certain agencies will submit basically a lot of our operating data on a daily basis, where they're helping us go through it to identify if we have a bad character, a bad individual who's maybe penetrated into our system. So it's a strong collaboration, and Warren, you're absolutely right. It's very unique to see how both the industry and the government's working so closely. But I think we both recognize it as such a significant risk. We have to stay strongly aligned on the approach.
It's a real partnership. It's a
Yeah.
real partnership. And we can do better because the government is helping us, and the government can do better because we're helping them, and there's no lack of will on either side. And cyber, I mean, it blows your mind on sort of the nuclear is the number one threat, but it's a very, very, very low probability. Someday the sun will burn out too, it is. There's really no place for two countries with large ICBM possibilities and who knows what else and everything, but we haven't figured that out yet. It's easy to go around and say this is a solution or that's a solution, but if you have two people with loaded guns facing each other,
And not everybody is likely to be totally rational.
well, we see so much irrationality in where people's self-interest is involved. They're doing all kinds of things to destroy themselves in terms of how they live their lives and everything. And it doesn't stop with as you move up the ladder. Some people do terrible things, and you just have to very much hope that they aren't in a position where they can do it all by themselves with the rest of the world as their supposed prize. Okay. If Station 3 will please ask something about motherhood and apple pie or something like that.